Welcome to Unity. I am Reverend Marla Mason, and I am blessed and thrilled every day of my life to be your minister and to serve this brilliant and beautiful community. Unity is all about the love, right? That's what we do. We are all about the love. We are about waking up to the spiritual truth of our being. We are here to love, to grow, to serve. We are here to love God and to love one another. We are here to grow in our spiritual understanding, and we are here to serve the common good, to serve the greater good, in order that we can make the world a better place for all people. In March, we are talking about being open to possibilities, casting a vision for that future of a world that works for everyone by first casting a vision for our personal lives. What is God's vision for our lives? How are we called to grow? And we get quiet and we begin to capture God's vision. We begin to, as Reverend Michael Beckwith says, we begin to catch God's vision for our lives. And then we move into a sacred listening, an awareness of the truth of who we are. And there are some questions we ask ourselves in order that we might move boldly into that vision. And we're going to go into some detail on this a little bit later today. We're going to talk today about how to let the vision live you. How to allow the vision to move from consciousness into action in the world. And there's a balance when we do that. There's a balance between action, taking steps, and surrendering to what is. There's a balance between doing and being, a balance between driving and allowing. And that's what we're going to talk about in some detail today with the 4 Ds of bringing your spiritual vision into form in the world. We are doing that supported by a number of beautiful folks today. First off, thank you, Susan Neidig, for a lovely meditation this morning. Really grateful for you and for the consciousness that you bring to our meditation services. Susan is serving also as a prayer chaplain this morning, along with Jennifer Holt. Susan and Jennifer will be available to provide our prayer circle at the end of the service. When we close here, there will be a short break, and then Susan and Jennifer will lead that prayer circle. You can feel free to just stay on at the end of the service and get yourself supported in prayer. Our board host today is Dorothy Bostetter. She is going to lead us in the offering, and I'm super grateful for her. She's your board treasurer. And if you haven't expressed a gratitude for Dorothy Bostetter lately, please do. She does so much to keep our business and our financial house in order here at Unity. Our producer today is Monica McDowell-Elvig. She's also our center administrator, and we are always so deeply grateful for her and the grace and the wisdom that she brings to the administrative leadership of our center. I want to welcome our guest artist today is Amber Sweeney. Amber is a light in the world. She's a Pacific Northwest singer-songwriter. She knocks it out of the park every song I've ever heard her sing. And you know, I got on her website yesterday and I was kind of looking at some info about her. And what I didn't know is that she's an advocate for and a supporter of what is called the Rock Solid Teen Center, the Rock Solid Teen Center in Battleground in central Western Washington, which is an organization that works with teens, like to just get them grounded and rock solid so that they can be rock solid adults. So thank you, Amber, for that beautiful work. And thank you for bringing your music to our center this morning. Amber has a song for us.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction, and thank you guys for having me this morning. This is a song called Breathe. When we stop, smell the roses, really live in the moment, and everything is moving so fast. We're looking at screens instead of each other, wondering why we're so disconnected. Simply hold my hand and just breathe with me. Slow down with me, darling. Go easy when you're loving me. 'Cause every moment counts when we're together. Oh, yeah, yeah. The sea of emotion when everyone is losing their mind. We turn on the TV, see what is streaming, telling ourselves that we're doing fine. Are we doing fine? I don't think you look me in the eye. Just breathe with me, honey. Slow down, with me, darling. Go easy when you're loving me. Every moment counts with us. So come on, breathe with me, honey. Slow down with me, darling. Go easy when you're loving me. 'Cause every moment counts when we're together. And we you simply hold my hand. Talk about the world, take a walk around the world together. Whoa, we can lose things looking for joy in each other's eyes. We can find a little space to lay our burdens down. Ooh. So everybody breathe in, take a long breath out. Come on, breathe in. Go ahead and breathe out. Come on and breathe in. Go ahead and breathe out. Last time. Come on, breathe in. And then breathe out. Just breathe with me, honey. Slow down with me, darling. You say when you're loving me. Every moment counts with us. So come on, breathe with me, honey. Slow down, darling. Go easy, you're loving me. Every moment counts, every moment counts. Just breathe. Every moment counts when we're together. When we're together.
And so we breathe with one another. We take the sacred breath. And we allow ourselves to be inspired by the very spirit of all life. We allow ourselves to be lifted, to be opened in our willingness to learn, to grow, to deepen in spiritual understanding. We open our hearts and our minds. We open our very self to the spiritual truth of our oneness with the infinite. And in that consciousness of unity, that consciousness of oneness, we make ourselves available to the music, to the message, to the fellowship we share, to everything that is unfolding this morning. For we know that transformation is where it's at, and we are willing to be transformed. I give thanks for this sacred yes, and I give thanks for the opportunity to lean into spiritual community with one another this day. I open this service with a grateful heart, and so it is. Amen. All right. This month's affirmation was written by Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith. He's the author of our book of the month, the Life Visioning book that he wrote a few years ago. It's a powerful read, so get your hands on a copy of that book. And for the affirmation this morning, I'm going to read a phrase, and I invite you to speak that phrase with conviction in the privacy of your own home. So please join me as I lead us in this morning's affirmation. I am willing to evolve. I am willing to become more myself. I am willing to drop opinions that no longer serve the evolution of my soul. I am willing and available to more good than I have ever experienced. Realized, imagined, or manifested before. Right here, right now. And so it is.
Stay down in the club, stars to talk. Money spend times I show. Now that's it that I'm giving you, girl. Somebody else who wants it. These girls are great. I won't give up tonight. One while since I lose so loving ain't same when you wake up. That doesn't mean I'm not living my life. Don't need a man, but I'm sure this is tonight. I'll take this heart and keep it. Oh, I won't keep it tonight. Oh, the road I love keep dragging on. I'll find a way to keep these dreams on. Now that's it. That I'm giving inside. All I need is one more sun. I'll take these dreams again. I won't give up tonight. Boy, until So come on, let your
Thank you, Amber. You know, just need to let everybody know that Amber and I were chatting after her first song because the audio isn't working very well, is it? And she said she's having some unstable internet issues. And I just want to let you know, Amber, and I'll let everybody know, you don't want to miss Amber singing a song like this. She's an amazing singer, and we want to hear every single note, and we want to hear it as beautifully as we know she can produce it. So what she and I are going to do is we're going to put our heads together this coming week, and we're going to find a date that she can come back and bless us again, and we'll sort out whatever these internet issues are. And maybe by the time we get to her last song, we'll just pray it up that some kind of beautiful internet magic is happening and that things stabilize for Amber in the next 20 or 30 minutes, right? I'm willing to receive that. Let's all be willing to receive that in consciousness together. Now, let's talk a little bit about where we have been together this month. We've been talking about the life visioning process that Reverend Michael Beckwith developed and how we can use that process to put the infinite intelligence of God to work for us in our personal lives so that we can make a difference in the world. So let's first review briefly week 1, where we talked about the visioning process and what it is. First, what we need to do in order to really catch God's vision for our lives is to anchor in love and to listen from a place of love to what the divine idea is for our lives. And as we begin to get clear on that, we begin to ask quality questions. We begin to ask ourselves questions that can actually make our lives better, instead of questions like what's wrong with me, or why doesn't anybody love me, or how come I can never get a great job. Instead of asking those kinds of questions, we begin to ask quality questions. Like, in order for me to realize God's vision for my life, what must I become? What must I embrace? What must I release? How must I grow in order to be a receptacle, if you will, for this vision so that it can express divinely as me. So we work with those quality questions in order to begin to realize the vision. We don't work on the vision, we work on the quality questions, and the vision naturally unfolds from that work. Then in week 2, which was last week, we talked about the stages of spiritual development, because we want to vision from a particular place. Yes, anchored in love, we want to vision anchored in love, but from a particular consciousness, a particular place in consciousness. So these kingdoms of consciousness, or states of awareness, if you will, begin with the first stage of spiritual growth. The first stage is, I know y'all know this because we just talked about it last week, to me. The first stage is that victim stage of consciousness where everything is happening to me. I find myself reacting to the world as though I were being victimized by the institutions and by the people around me. And this stage is characterized by some not very quality questions like, why me? When we start asking ourselves things like, I was all up in my victim consciousness about the vaccine. How come everybody else gets to get vaccinated, but I don't? I was all up in to me consciousness around that. And then look, when I started working with it and releasing my sense of victim about that, then, the guidelines changed and now I'm eligible on March 31st. So I'm pretty excited about that. I want to make one thing clear, because I did have a conversation with someone this week. This doesn't mean that we are not sometimes victimized, right? Somebody broke into our garage last year and stole some tools. We were definitely victimized. the to me consciousness or the victim consciousness is, how am I with that? Wow, somebody stole some tools out of my garage. Wow, maybe I should have done a little more security. Maybe I should, well, I guess they needed those tools or the money they brought worse than we did. Do you see how that's one way of being present to being victimized? Or I can call on my neighbors and whine and complain about how somebody broke into my garage, and the world just isn't a safe place anymore, and kids these days, do you see it? That's victim consciousness. So the stage one of spiritual growth does not necessarily mean that we're never victimized. Sometimes we are. It's how are we present to the experience of victimization. So to me is that stage one of spiritual consciousness. We move into stage two, by me, where everything is done by me. We begin to surrender that victim consciousness. We begin to take responsibility for our lives. And we move into this place where everything is done by me. I become very competent. I develop life skills. In the by me stage, I can do what needs to be done to manage my life. The challenge of the by me stage is I'm doing it all. I'm doing it all. And what I must do to move to the third stage of development is surrender my need for control. Everybody's favorite thing to surrender, right? We have to surrender our need to control, and we move into through me consciousness, where I allow spirit to do the work, where I allow God to move through me. I become a channel or a vessel for the infinite. And as I continue to do this work, I completely release my sense of individual self and move into a complete state or awareness of unity. And I can move into the as me stage of spiritual development, where I just know myself as fully and completely at one with God. This as me stage is a stage that I've only experienced in times of meditation. And not even every time I meditate. Or I've had a couple of kind of flow experiences where I really felt like something was moving me. This as me stage is really a stage of complete and total enlightenment. Yeah, so these are the stages of spiritual development. This is important to this conversation about visioning, because as I said, we want to vision from a particular place. We want to lift ourselves into that through me stage 3 consciousness, so that we're really listening with the divine mind. We're listening for God's vision with a bigger mind than my human mind, because God has better ideas than I do. That's just kind of the way it works. So today we're going to talk about how to be available to the vision, how to live into the vision. If you'd like to hear more about those other 2 talks, they're available. They're in our library on our website. And you can listen to those and get all of the details on those. But today we're particularly talking about how do we live into the vision. And sometimes it's best to start talking about how to do something by talking about how not, why don't we live into the vision? Why don't we live into God's vision for our lives? And I think there's a few things that go on for us here. One is, we can say to ourselves, well, I just don't know what it is. I don't know what God's vision for my life is. It's too hard. And I thought I knew, and I went off and I did all these things, and then that wasn't it. And then I went over here and I did all these things, and that wasn't it. I thought I knew, but I didn't. So I can't have any hope of knowing. So we either don't know God's vision for our lives, or we think we don't know, or we think we knew, but then everything didn't go perfectly, so we gave it up. Another reason that we sometimes don't live into God's vision for our lives is we just believe it can't be done. We just say, you know what? It can't be done. It can't happen. I had a friend once who was, she had a day job, right? But where her passion was, and where the God's vision for her life really was in jewelry design. And her jewelry was absolutely beautiful. And we talked about this a lot for about a year, because that's really what she wanted to do. And she wanted to quit her day job and just be a full-time jewelry designer. And one night I heard her say, there's just not any money in jewelry design. I can't support myself. There's no money in it. And I had this moment of clarity and I looked at her and I said, have you ever heard of Cartier? Tiffany? There's money in jewelry design. But you see, she didn't believe it was possible. And over the next year, she actually did quit her job and she opened a gallery and a studio, and she makes her living now as a jewelry designer. So we might believe it can't be done, but all things are possible for God. A third reason that we sometimes don't live into God's vision for our lives is we think we've done it. I had a friend once who said, you know, I did the visioning thing. I've worked the last 10 years. I've created everything that I said I wanted to create. Now I have it. Now I'm kind of bored. Like, seriously, what did I do wrong? And I'm like, you didn't do anything wrong. You did it all just exactly perfectly. Now you need to get a bigger vision. Do you see? God is infinite. If you think you've lived into God's vision for your life and you think you're done, you're not done. God is infinite. So the vision is infinite. So just get a bigger vision and move into the next opportunity to learn and grow in spirit. Now, there's one thing to notice about all three of these reasons that we often don't live into God's vision for our lives. And that is that this kind of thinking is stages 1 and 2 thinking, right? It's to me thinking. Oh, I don't know what my vision is. I don't know. That's victim. That's to me consciousness. I don't believe it could be done. You know, jewelry making, it just doesn't pay. That's stage 1 consciousness. You know what, I've lived into my vision. I've done everything. I've lived into God's vision for my life. Like, that's stage 2 consciousness, and maybe even a little stage 1. So just know that all of the reasons that we don't live into God's vision for our lives are because we are thinking small. We are thinking on the side of the stages of spiritual development that still believe in duality. Stages 1 and 2 still believe that God and I are separate, that things are outside of me. Stages 3 and 4 is where we move into this unitive realization of the spiritual truth that there is only one thing happening, and we are having our experience in the midst of that thing that's happening. And so release that stage 1 and 2 thinking, surrender to God's vision. That's one of the steps we take in the full visioning process. Release blame, shame, and guilt so that you can move out of stage 1. Release control so that you can move out of stage 2 and allow yourself to begin to live the life that God would have you live. Emma Curtis Hopkins put it this way. She said, the only thing between you and your good is an idea. The only thing between you and your good is an idea. And let me just say, as I look beneath all the reasons that, you know, I don't always live into the fullness of God's idea for my life, when I look at what's under that reluctance, the idea is almost always fear. It's almost always a fear of judgment, a fear of not measuring up, a fear of my own unworthiness showing up. And all of that is from the stages 1 and 2 side of the consciousness development, the stages of spiritual growth, if you will, the side of duality. And so when I can stand in the face of my fears and move forward courageously, knowing the truth of my being, knowing that I am created in the image and likeness of something infinite and powerful and great, and that all it wants to do is express as me, and it wants to express in beautiful ways. It can't wait. And I begin to work the questions and release my fears. I can release that blame, shame, and guilt. I can release my need to control and allow myself to do the work from that stage 3 consciousness. I am an instrument, I am a vessel, I am a channel for the infinite to express divinely and perfectly in the world. So how do we move through that fear? How do we let the vision live us? What is, in other words, if Emma says, the only thing between me and my good is an idea, what is the new idea I can get that will help me move through these stages so that I can catch God's vision, and then work the questions in a way that is life affirming and is going to produce good results in my life. And so what I have for you is 4 Ds, all right? Now, some of you may remember a little over 3 years ago, I came to you with 4 Ds. These are the exact same Ds. So if you're a note taker, you've got them somewhere. But I thought, you know, it's been over 3 years. We might want to visit the 4 Ds once again. And I'm sure you've all been working your 4 Ds for the last 3 years, right? I'm sure you have. Okay. So let's talk again about the 4 Ds. These are the 4 Ds that are going to allow us to let the vision live us, that are going to allow us to be that stage 3 consciousness. I'm not saying that right. These are the 4 Ds that are going to allow us to cultivate a place of receptivity for the vision to express as us. So the 4 Ds are these. I'm going to give you all 4 and then we'll go back and talk about them. The first D is devotion. Devotion. The second D is dedication. The third D is discernment. Discernment. And the final D, everybody's favorite, detachment. Devotion, dedication, discernment, and detachment. If we develop skill in these 4 areas of our lives, we are developing the ability to camp out in that stage 3 consciousness. So first, devotion. What are we devoted to? Devotion means, you know, we're devoted to something. We give it our attention. We give it our time. When we're devoted to something, it is important to us. It is important enough to us that we make it a priority in our lives. And I say our devotion must be to God first. Seek first the kingdom, and all else is added unto you. Our devotion to God. You see, through the practice of devotion, we can catch that bigger vision. Through the practice of devotion, we can work. Remember, the questions are things like, what must I become to live God's vision? What must I release to live God's vision for my life? How must I grow? When we're devoted to God first, we work those questions from a certain place in consciousness of blame or shame or guilt or a need to control or be about it, be in charge. We are devoted to something greater than we are. And you can call it God, you can call it infinite energy, you can call it the something greater. My favorite name for God is a translation of a Hebrew word, the living one. That is my favorite name for God. The living one, capital T, the, capital L, living, capital O, one, the living one, that which lives infinitely and always in capital letters. So our devotion must be to that something greater, to the living one, because the living one is bigger than my fears. The living one is bigger than any false ideas I may have. And what does God want more than anything? God wants to express when we're devoted to the living one, to God, to that something greater. We become centers of expression. And that's why it's true that when we seek first the kingdom, all else is added unto us. All it wants to do is express. When we become devoted to it, it expresses more and more fully as us. We make God a priority in our lives. It is most important. We have to want God more than we want anything else, because the everything else is contained in God. Kingdom first, then everything else. So your first D is devotion. Be devoted to that something greater. Make it the most important thing in your life. It is your priority. And the second D is dedication. When we've said, I am devoted to the infinite life as it is living me, and I am dedicated to its vision for my life, I am dedicated to the beautiful and full ways that it wants to express as me. And there are kind of two sub Ds in our dedication D. The two sub Ds for dedication under the idea of dedication to the vision. The first one is determined. I am determined. Determination. I am determined that every step I take is toward the vision. You see, every step we take is either towards something or away from something, right? This is not news. We're either moving towards something or we're moving away from something. Make sure that you are dedicated to the vision such that you are determined that every step you take is toward the vision. And that requires the second D, which is discipline. I don't know about you, I'm not always the most disciplined soul on the planet. Oh, heavens, yeah. This is actually my thing right here. So the second sub D of dedication is discipline. I must develop mental discipline. I must tell my mind how to think. I must develop physical discipline. I must, treat my body well and engage in healthy disciplines for my life. And I must engage in spiritual practice. I must be disciplined about my spiritual practice. I must engage in my spiritual practice on a regular basis so that God has a place to show up as me. It's interesting, this word discipline. I don't know about you, but sometimes it's a word that makes me a little nervous. Discipline, like somehow you've been bad. But the thing about discipline is that it's just being in the place where you can develop habits that serve something greater in you. A year ago, is it March? It's March. A year ago last month, I decided I was going to exercise at least 5 days a week. And I got to tell you, the first 6 months of that was a slog. I mean, I had some mornings where I had to just get up and I had to absolutely convince myself to do it. I had to use discipline. And you know what? Now, a year and a month later, I have to do it. Like I don't even think about it. I get out of bed, I go right over to the elliptical, I start in. It's like, and when I don't do it, like I give myself permission to take Saturdays and Sundays off. Sometimes I do Saturdays anyway, because now when I wake up on Saturday morning, it's like, I'm supposed to be exercising right now. And I miss it. Do you see? But what it took to get there was discipline. And you know what? My body feels healthier than it has in a long, long time, y'all. And I'm experiencing a sense of freedom in my body. And this is what a great illustration of what Reverend Marcia Sutton says. She says true freedom lies in obedience to the principles. Another favorite word of many of us, right? Obedience. See, when we're being disciplined, we're being obedient to the principles. And Reverend Marcia says true freedom lies in this obedience. Do you see? My body is experiencing a sense of freedom that it hasn't had in years because I have been obedient to the principles that govern physical health. And I developed a discipline around it. And I was willing to, talk myself into it long enough that now if I don't do it, I don't feel as free. Do you see? And if, we say freedom is the proof of truth, the truth will set you free. I feel more free. It must be right for me to engage in this daily discipline. So remember, the second D is dedication to God's vision for our lives. And there's two sub Ds. The first is determination, making sure that every step we are determined that every step we take is toward the vision. And the second one is discipline. We are willing to develop the mental, the physical, the spiritual discipline that must be in place in order for the vision to make itself known as us. So, now we're up to our third D, right? Your third D is discernment. And here's the interesting thing. When we do our first 2Ds, when we become devoted to something greater than we are, when we make God or the living one or the infinite energy the most important thing in our life so that all else can be added unto us, when we develop that devotion and when we become dedicated to the vision, we begin to develop wisdom. We begin to learn and grow and we become more wise. And discernment is nothing other than applied wisdom. Our third D is applied wisdom. You know, we have to balance the needs. You know, I mean, it was wise of me to get on the elliptical the first time a year ago, February, right? Or the first time in 15 years, a year ago, February. That was wise of me. It would have been unwise of me to work it so hard that I abused my body. You know, it was wise of me to start slow. I had not been moving very much for a while. It was wise of me to give myself permission to go as slow as I needed to go. And now, you know, I can go pretty darn good on that thing. So I applied wisdom to becoming dedicated to something greater than I am and developing some discipline. The cool thing about applied wisdom or discernment is that it builds consciousness, right? In the same way that getting on the elliptical built a little bit more muscle, a little bit more stamina every single day, by applying wisdom in my life, I get more wisdom, right? What you put your attention on increases. And so my consciousness begins to build, just like my stamina, my breathing stamina and my muscles start to build by being disciplined and engaging in my physical exercise every single day, no matter what. And so what we want to do is use our discernment to ensure that we are applying wisdom in our lives such that we're creating the necessary conditions for the vision to show up. We focus on the highest good. We behave wisely. We, you know, I mean, one of the things, you know, God is the most important thing in my life, right? But that doesn't mean I go and I join, you know, a commune. That wouldn't be wise, you know, a 100% God-focused commune. That wouldn't be wise. I have a family, I have relationships, I have a job, you know, and so we want to make sure that we apply wisdom, that we use the spiritual skill of discernment to balance the needs of our lives. You know, we got to have jobs, we got to have income, we got to have all the things that are happening in the world of form, because we are doing our best to realize God's vision for our lives in the realm of form. Here we are in the realm of form. Let's be wise about how we engage with the realm of form. And our final D, our fourth D, as I said, everybody's favorite, detachment. We must be completely unattached to any outcome. We catch God's vision for our lives through the process we talked about in week 1. We vision from a particular place, as we talked about in week 2. We be devoted and dedicated and discerning in our daily lives to create the space for that vision to show up. And then we're completely unattached to the outcome. At the same time, we must care deeply about the outcome. See, I mean, it sounds ironic, doesn't it? I'm asking you to care deeply about the result at the same time that you don't care at all about the result. That might be like the essence of the spiritual journey right there. See, we're devoted, we're dedicated, we're discerning, and then we apply detachment. We let it go. That is such a Kingdom 3 thing, because what we're doing when we let it go is we are saying to the universe, I trust that here in the realm of form, I have done and been all I must do and be for the perfect outcome to make itself known. And I don't need to work anything. I don't need to be attached to anything. I just let it go and continue the work. And remember, you're doing this work, devotion, dedication, discernment, and detachment. You're doing this work in the context of the visioning questions that you asked. What must I become? What must I release? How must I grow in order to bring this vision to life? So you're doing all of this work, being present to, if you will, this work. And then you're just doing it. And you know what must I become? You might have an answer here. And then you don't become that. Okay. Now what must I become? And then you don't become that. Okay. Now what must I become? Do you see? It just becomes a springboard into whatever the next thing is for you. And I promise you, the universe is trustworthy. When we make ourselves available to it, it will make itself available to us. And it will meet us 100% where we are. If I'm in stage 1 victim consciousness, God will meet me there. If I'm in kingdom 2, by me consciousness, God will meet me there. If I'm in kingdom 3, kingdom 4, God will meet me where I am. And it will call me forward into my next greater yet to be. And it might look like I'm stumbling and falling. It might look like this or that or the other thing. But if I pull away far enough, I can see a divine order unfolding in my life. We were talking in class the other night. For some reason, I've thought about this a lot. An earthquake, for this metaphor, this idea jumped into my head, and I said it in class that, you know, an earthquake might look like a disaster in my life. But when those plates are shifting, it's actually easing the earth. Do you see? Like something wonderful is happening at the earth level. It's easing the pressure. It's making life better for the tectonic plates. But I can only see that if I get out of my an earthquake is bad consciousness and allow myself to see, yeah, sure, maybe in my experience, especially if people I love or property I'm attached to in some way are hurt or something like that, you know, it might look like a really bad thing. But the fact is, there is a tension, that tension so big we probably can't even really imagine it, that is being released by that cataclysmic event. And I have to get far enough away to see that. And so what looks like a disaster in your life as you're working these principles to move toward your vision, you got to get far enough away to see that in some way it's preparing you. In some way it is preparing you to make yourself more and more available to that kingdom 3 consciousness. I can promise you that is true, because that is my story over and over and over again in my 62 years of life. And freedom is what we're really after, right? Ultimately, what we all want to experience is more and more freedom. And I just want to remind you that freedom is not a state of being. Freedom is a feeling. And when we're visioning, one of the questions that we ask when we say, what is God's vision for my life? One of the questions we ask is, how does it feel to be in that vision? And you might get in touch with some very real freedoms, but I'll tell you what is almost always there. I've never had a visioning in which a feeling of freedom was not evident in my experience, in my mental experience, in my catching God's vision. You see, that feeling of freedom is what is at the core of our vision, of God's vision for our lives. So our vision is not the thing. Our vision is the feeling. And the feeling is always a feeling of freedom. And when we embrace that feeling of freedom, even when things seem to go sideways, we are doing God's work. We are being devoted to something greater than we are. We are being dedicated to the vision. We are applying discernment. We are applying wisdom to our experience, and we are allowing ourselves to detach more and more fully from any attachment to outcome. And so let's turn within right now and simply breathe together, recognizing we breathe the sacred breath, that something is breathing us, and that we do not breathe ourselves, that there is something greater than we are. There is something beyond our imagining. Every cell in our body is alive with it, every pore in our skin exuding it. Every moment of our thinking, every corner of our being alive with this essence of spirit, for we are created. From it, as it, by it, through it, we are its divine expression. And so I ask you to consider right now, am I devoted to this something greater than I am? Am I willing to be devoted to this infinite presence that breathes me, that beats my heart, that enlivens my very being? Am I willing to be devoted to this essence, to this life? And am I willing to be dedicated to its vision? Am I willing to ensure that every step I take is toward the vision? Am I willing to be disciplined in my daily practice in ways that support the vision? Allow the sacred yes to make itself known to you now. And am I willing to be discerning, to apply the wisdom I gain in my practice of life to every situation? Am I willing to apply the wisdom of the infinite in my daily life? And in the end, am I willing to be completely detached from any outcome? Am I willing to allow the divine pattern to express, to care deeply about the results and not care at all about the results? Am I willing to let it go? And at the same time, to continue to be devoted, dedicated, and discerning as I continue to move towards God's vision for my life. Allow the sacred yes to permeate your heart and your mind, releasing any fears, any ideas that might stand between you and your good. And now give thanks for the wisdom that's been given you here. Give thanks for the opening in your heart and in your soul to something greater. And I close this message with a grateful heart, knowing that we have been transformed and that we are willing participants in this transformation. God is good and all is well, and so it is. Amen.
Thank you, Amber. And thank you, Reverend Marla, for a wonderful message. I'm Dorothy Bostetter. I am your board treasurer, and I am the board host today. I look outside this Pacific Northwest morning, and for those of you in the Puget Sound, you see what I see, clouds and rain. Sometimes it's hard to remember that today marks on the calendar the first day of spring this weekend. The sun is up there. Reverend Marla, your message reminds us that when we don't have the God energy, we don't have the God vision, we can employ devotion, dedication, discernment, and detachment to reach that God place. And I'm so grateful for the message in this community to experience that together today. This is the part of our service where we recognize the abundance of God in, through, and as our lives, and our opportunity to bless our spiritual center with our love offerings and our abundance. During this virtual time, you are invited to go to our website or the other options on the screen to bless the community with your financial gifts, with your prosperity, with your abundance. Thank you for being here today. And please join me in our offering affirmation. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And so it is.
So I do give thanks for these offerings of love. I give thanks for these offerings in support of our beautiful and our bountiful spiritual center. I know that we are amply provided for by the divine mind that has called us forth as this community. And so I give thanks for the gift and for the giver, and I give thanks for the infinite presence that makes it all so. And so it is. Amen.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Monica McDowell-Elvig. Sorry, I had to do a few extra keystrokes this morning. I am your center administrator. If you are visiting with us for the first time, we welcome you to Unity of Bellevue. We open our hearts to you. We invite you to consider living out your divine vision for your life with us. We are completely online right now, and so the best way to stay in contact with us, to know everything that's happening, is to go to our website, unityofbellevue.org, and at the bottom of every page is a sign-up form for our weekly e-newsletter that comes out every Thursday morning. If you do that, I will send you a welcome packet. I'll connect with you. So please go to our website, check it out. There's an I'm New page. And we just would invite you to reach out to us and let us know who you are and connect with us during this time of isolation that we're continuing in. Some things that are happening today: we have our prayer circle immediately following our celebration service. We'll take a 3-minute break, and Susan and Jennifer will be praying with you during that prayer circle. All are invited. You can also email them at prayerchaplains@unityofbellevue.org if you have any prayer requests. Also happening this week, every Wednesday at 1 p.m. is our weekly drop-in spiritual practice group with Reverend Marla called Living What Matters. They're using the Book of Soul by Mark Nepo. It's a great group. It's free. You can find the Zoom link for that on our website and at the links. So please join us for that. Some things that are coming up that are really special: Easter is not far away, and the Easter Bunny is coming to town. Saturday, April 3rd, 2 to 4, we're having our Easter Bunny drive-through. Everyone is welcome. The community is welcome. Please let your family and friends know. Sabrina would love some support for that, prepping for that, donations for that, different things. So reach out to her. Her email is in the chat, and she would love to have that be a really special way for us to introduce Unity to the community and our preschool to the community. We also have, along with that, our Easter basket fundraiser. You can get your Easter baskets during that drive-through. I just want to show you some of the things that we have for the little bunnies. We have a basket full of great goodies and fun games. So consider that. It's $20. You can go to the link. We also have, for the big bunnies in your life, Coffee Madness and Time for Tea. So those are some of the things that are in those baskets. You know, it's been a tough year for a lot of people. This is a great way to show love for them. It's a great way to show love for Unity of Bellevue. It's a fundraiser. And so consider doing that. You can also, at this time, sign up for Rite Aid. Every time you use your dollars at Rite Aid, you help Unity of Bellevue. The sign-up link is in the chat. So thanks, everyone. Have a blessed week. We love you.
Thank you, Monica. I'm so grateful for this community. I want to let you guys know that I'm in charge of the Big Bunny coffee basket. So, and I'm a little, you know, I would say this is probably my final addiction. And so you can trust me, the coffee basket is a real winner. If you have coffee lovers in your life, get them the coffee basket for Easter. Let's close with the prayer for protection. And don't forget, you can stick around for prayer circle if you'd like to receive from some prayer support from Unity Prayer Chaplains today. Oh, look, see? There we go, coffee basket. All right. Join me in the prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you Wednesday at Living What Matters. Bye-bye.
Up, up, up to a higher place. Up, 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 far beyond this time and space. Up, up, up to a higher place. I feel my soul rising to a higher place. Up, up, up to a higher place. Up, 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 far beyond this time and space. Up, up, up to a higher place. I feel my soul rising to a higher place. A higher place, higher place. I feel my soul rising to a higher place. No more forward, no more backward, no more spinning around and around. My life is moving ever upward. My feet are leaving the ground. Ooh. Up, up, up to a higher place. Up, 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 far beyond this time and space. Up, up, up to a higher place. I feel my